Hey, good day to you. This is Todd. I'm just a regular dude walking in the Word. Today, we're continuing our journey through the book of Mark. And yesterday, remember, we talked about the resurrection and marriage and like who's going to get the wife after when you get to heaven. And we talked about how Jesus had said heaven is much more than what you can imagine here. We're continuing today, and in this series, in this chapter, really, people are coming to Jesus and they're questioning Jesus, trying to trip him up. And this is going to be like the last question here. It's like they sent the group of Pharisees first, then they sent Pharisees and Herodians first, which they didn't get along, but they're going to both work together to trap Jesus. That didn't work, so the Sadducees came, which that was the group last time we talked about, and that didn't work. So now we're finally a guy comes up and he asks a question, and he's a little more sincere than these other guys. The other guys were just trying to trap him, but this guy is a little more sincere. And I'm going to be reading from Mark 12 verses 28 through 34. That's Mark 12, 28 through 34. It says this: one of the teachers of the law came and heard them debating. Noticing that Jesus had given them a good answer, he asked them, "Of all the commandments, which is the most important?" "The most important one," answered Jesus, "is this: Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. The second is this: love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these." "Well said, teacher," the man replied. "You are right in saying that God is one and there is no other but him. To love him with all your heart and with all your understanding, with all your strength, and to love him, your neighbor as yourself, is more important than all the burnt offerings and sacrifices." So this guy was answering, and was like to Jesus, "Yeah, you're right." And then verse 34. When Jesus saw that he had answered wisely, he said to him, "You are not far from the kingdom of God." And from then on, no one dared ask him any more questions. Let me ask you a question. How many of the 10 Commandments can you recite? I ask this question a lot when I'm teaching kids, and we've taught kids, many, many years. And well, if you would go out in the street, there wouldn't be many people that can name all 10 commandments. But what if I told you today that you don't have to know all the 10 commandments? You really only need to know 2. Now we've taught, I like to do is I spend a week on each commandment, going through the 10 commandments and teaching on each of the 10 commandments and having the kids memorize the 10 commandments. Then at the end, we talk about the 2 most important. Here's a little thing I like to do with the kids. It's a little saying, it's a quirky saying that goes like this: "Go into Venice, silly puppy, monkeys and snakes like everybody." You're saying, well, that sounds absurd, and it is absurd. And it's so absurd that it helps you to remember the 10 commandments. Go into Venice, silly puppy, monkeys and snakes like everybody. Each of those, if you say go, that's the first commandment. It starts with G, God. Into is idols. Go into Venice, okay? Don't take the Lord's name in vain, V, okay? So all the 10 commandments work down through like that. So if you know that saying, that's an easy way to do that. And you can get to the last one, go into Venice, silly puppy, and I say to you, "Man, what's the 10th commandment?" And you go into Venice, silly puppy, monkeys and snakes like everybody. Everybody. That stands for envy, okay? Which is also coveting. And so that's the last commandment. Don't envy or covet. But Jesus was asked, what's the greatest commandment? And his response was, first of all, love the Lord your God. And that sums up the first of the 10 commandments. And then he said, love your neighbor as yourself. Well, that sums up the rest of the 10 commandments, okay? If I love my neighbor as myself, I'm not going to be taking my neighbor's wife. I'm not going to be stealing from them. I'm not going to be coveting their stuff. That's the last commandment. All those commandments are tied up into those two things. So if you remember just simply this: love God, love your neighbor, everything is fine. So that's just an easy way to say it. And that's what Jesus was saying here. He was saying, what's the greatest commandment? He said, well, the greatest two are to love God, and then love your neighbor as yourself. So, and then that sums up everything. If you obeyed all that, you wouldn't need all the law of Moses or all the books of law, because everything is spelled out there. If I love my neighbor, I'm not going to, like I said before, steal his truck and steal his wife and covet and have adultery and all that stuff. Okay, if I love God, I'm going to honor the Sabbath. I'm going to not take his name in vain, and so forth. You get the picture. So that's my word for today. You don't have to know all the 10 commandments. I would highly encourage it and highly recommend it. But if you know the two, love God, love your neighbor as yourself, it's all covered. All right. So Lord's blessing to you. Thank you for watching, and we will continue our journey through the book of Mark tomorrow. We'll see you then.